Peace and love, you guys. Salute to all the great people. Okay. I'm a little excited about this conversation because I really do think that is definitely worthy of speaking about. And I definitely believe that we need specificity during these crazy times in boxing. I wanted to get into some very detailed, very specific, very concrete aspects and points of analysis for us as a collective, for all boxing fans, and particularly for the Black boxing fan, of this mindset and of this likeness that can understand how these particular matters are very, very imperative for us to discuss. Okay? It's a deep conversation. There's quite a few bit of points that I'm going to be making in this dialogue, but I assume that we are all adults, and I assume always that I am speaking to cognizant people who are ready to enter this particular depth of field with me. So I'll start here. How is it that the most dominant people within the sport, historically and currently, have no representation, no unifying factor that ties us to an identity, to a source of power, a history, and understanding within the sport of boxing? This is the black code that needs solidifying in the fire, y'all. Now, this is a topic that holds significant weight, okay? It's quite substantial in its relevance and in its ties to much of the language that we hear today that form and shape, various perspectives within American culture, and more specifically, the boxing world. This is a subject that seems to leave many people, real talk, on the borderline and in the gray areas, so to speak, within boxing. And it may very well need actually several conversations, several videos for us to unpack sufficiently enough to break the surface of its layers and the multidimensional aspects of it. Okay. I'm not beyond that at all, that it'll probably take several conversations for us to really begin to pinch the surface area of it in a meaningful way. Now, since beginning this channel, my channel was only 4 months old, you guys. Right at the New Year's Eve, the ball didn't even drop yet. And I made this channel right on the border of the new year. And I basically I wanted to open up a kind of space where I could, share some perspectives, of course, on the sport that I love and that I'm very passionate about. Okay. And I also seek with this page to have it be a space where I can divulge and create a basis from which many of my thoughts can be expressed on several levels, as it also pertains, so not simply to boxing, but as it also pertains to the culture that I love, the culture that I came from, and the culture that I am extremely passionate about. Okay, that is to say, Black, African, Caribbean, diasporic culture. Okay, wherever we are, that is the culture that I come from. That's the culture that I represent. So I definitely have kind of a pan-Black, pan-Africanist perspective in everything that I do. And boxing is not apart from that. Boxing is not apart from that just because it is a sport, although I know it has become quite popular to be, divided and separated in one's identity. So, you're a sports goer, but you're not tied to your history. You're not tied to your culture. I just show up and watch the sport. I'm just watching the sport. I don't just do anything. I bring all of me to whatever it is that I touch. And so that stands to say that I am a boxing fan, but I am also a Black woman. I am also, tied to a lineage, a history, a perspective on myriad levels, right? So, speaking of myriad levels, we are a people of myriad backgrounds collectively, just Black people as a whole. We are a people of various backgrounds, customs, beliefs, faith systems, mindsets, dispositions, and forms. Yet despite all the variations and differences, we are still very much connected in a very fundamental way, right? There's a very fundamental understanding between us and within us of this cultural system that is unmistakable, undeniable, and 1000% powerful, if I may say so. Now, boxing is and has long been a sport dominated predominantly by Black men. Not that, there was never, any prominent fighters of any other particular backgrounds, because of course there were beautiful fighters of all sorts throughout boxing's history. But I want to say, since it, dawning into popular culture, popular American culture, that is, it has been, the most notable figures historically have been, Black men. Black men have kind of, taken that banner of the sport of boxing. Okay. So in addition to this, the sport of boxing has also been historically associated with masculinity, right? With power, okay? Triumph, vigor, right? A sense of virility, just to name a few. And this is just the idea of boxing as a whole, historically, what it has been associated with, what it has been known to kind of uphold ideologically, right? Power, authority, masculinity, drive, all of those sorts of things. That's its association. So I think that historically we could even go further back, because, it's if you look at ancient Africa, boxing, let's say in Kemet, or what we know now as Egypt, has also, this is presumed where we get the sport of boxing itself from. And, you see, these men posturing on, the carvings and on, in art depicted of these men preparing for war, or whether it was recreational, whatever the case was, the representation, the mystique of male power and dominance and authority was always steeped within the association with boxing, or what we now know to be boxing, stemming all the way from those ancient times. And that's not only within Africa, that's all over the world that this sport managed to gain some acclaim within. Okay. And so basically the sport is a representation of capacity, right? It's a representation of strength. It's a representation of power and dominance, right? Now, with this notion in mind, as it pertains to the very modern American / Western cultural system, these two aspects oppose each other, right? The two aspects being, number one, Black male dominance within the sport, and also the correlation of the sport's inherent and embedded symbolism of strength, ferocity, power, and let's say the alpha masculinity, right? They seem to pose a bit of a dichotomy in the minds of this society. And this is historically speaking. There's an opposition between the two. The view of the Black man, and next to this is this also ultra masculine, ultra powerful alpha male, which has historically not been in our modern times associated with Black masculinity, right? So the dichotomy is posed in the situation, okay? Because once again, I'll say it again, Black masculinity historically, as of let's say the modern era, Black masculinity has been denied to the Black man. He has not been allowed to assume that. Okay? The very thing, he's not as, the very thing that the sport expresses is what was suppressed in Blackness. Power, dominance, force, the imposition of one's will, and things of the like, right? So there's a dichotomy happening there between these two principles at one time. And in American culture, it's always been viewed basically as an oxymoronic projection to see this Black fighter, this Black male champion who is an elite, who is an authority in his field. Because after all, let's not forget, he was deemed, quote, inferior. He was deemed, quote, subhuman, right? He was made subservient to white people or to anything else that was not of African origin. Okay? And this is the historical background upon which I want all of you to be thinking from and to be pulling from. This is the context that boxing and American culture are being offset by when we think about the Black fighter. Now, with that context in hand, hopefully that this kind of sets the tone. So with that in hand, we can basically translate and transpose the aforementioned, right, into the current landscape of boxing. So we got into a bit of history. We got into a bit of, highlighting of the backdrop that this is stemming from. And we bring it into the present landscape of boxing, where we can potentially see many of the historical views and practices still permeating, still very much alive and present within the current notions of Black elite male fighters and Black fighters as a whole. Now, I highlight the elite Black male fighter because it's here where it seems to be more readily and rampantly exposed. Okay, we see it more rampantly, these notions at play on a mass level, that is, So I basically deemed this video the Black Code because it pulls on multiple meanings for me. One of the meanings is that within this country, there was such a thing indeed called the Black Codes, okay? And these were a set of laws set in place after the abolition of slavery and during the Reconstruction era, where laws were created basically to essentially re-enslave African people. That's what it was for. Okay, and it forced them to basically a permanent second-class citizenship in this country and keep them subservient, keep them subjected to white rule, no matter their status. Okay, that was the point of the enforcement of Black codes, and it just had a whole bunch of, insidious, pernicious effects on our people and on the psyche of everybody who practiced it, white, Black, and everybody in between. Okay, if you're unfamiliar with this, y'all, go do your research. Okay, get familiar with your history, with your American history. That is very much a big deal and is very much real. The Black Code. So I pulled on that history for the title of this, but I also wanted to pull on the term Black Code because, as we know, my people, it's a very big deal for us, this idea of us being on code and standing on code. Right? That's something that we say, bro, you got to stand on your code, bro. You got to be on code. We on code, et cetera, right? This is something that we say often with each other. And within this aspect of the Black Code and us being on code, I wanted to kind of play with that aspect as well in a way in which that says, we create our codes now, It's an acknowledgement of our power and our redefinition of all things that concern us and how we move and the things that we do, right? So within this aspect of viewing what code means, we have a lot of power to direct our collective aims, our collective interests, our reach, basically. We are highly influential. We know that, Black man, Black woman can't do anything on the planet without it being mimicked, remixed and the like, right? So we are highly influential. And I wanted to, assume a centrality of this code for us, right? A language as a whole on a cultural level that speaks for us. as it pertains to the boxing world, because, since we're talking about boxing, we'll focus in on this particular boxing landscape. Now, why is culture so highlighted and so specified within the sport of boxing, y'all? Just in general, the idea of culture and the specificity of culture within boxing. Y'all ever think about that? Okay. Let's say, we know that, let's say, Italian history, right? Rocky, Italian Stallion, and the sensation that movie was, right? That was a centralizing of a culture, of an ideology, of a stylized projection of a particular culture within boxing. Okay? That's an example of that. We know, let's say, European history as a whole has been toted and held up within the sport of boxing. And let's say, for another example, we can certainly clearly see the legacy created around Mexico and that Mexican posture and that Mexican style, right? Even the language that we use, Mexican style. Isn't that amazing? Mexican style. That's a grace put forth by this Mexican culture, and that is upheld and toted by Mexican people with avid pride and deep, deep, deep lineal ties to their history, right? So we see that represented culturally within the sport. And I'm definitely for cultural representation, pride, upliftment and understanding. I am about that. I love to see that. I'm a person who values heritage and history and lineage. Okay, that is my personal upbringing. I come from a family of very proud men and women, of fierce spirit, force, and culture. That is what I stand on, right? And with that stated, I find it all the more problematic that anytime Black, African, whatever it is that you want to call it, culture is uplifted, centralized, right? Put in a position of value, or anytime that it's displayed unapologetically, that there always appears to be an issue at hand that follows, always a mist of, repose toward it, towards this assumption and centralizing of Black culture being expressed unapologetically, right? There always seems to be a downcasting, a downplaying, or a castigating response to it. And to me, that's an effort of suppression, okay? It seems to be an effort to suppress the expression of that Black cultural standing within the sport, okay? Real talk, y'all, nothing has changed from the days of old that I spoke about, okay? These historical references and things that I'm pulling from as far as it pertains to our culture and the views of our culture from people on the outside looking in, and definitely from people within looking without, right? Nothing's changed from the days of old, although there is a mystifying perspective that wants us to believe that it has, that things have changed. But that's certainly not the case as far as these views. These views are not new. We did not wake up to them this morning. They have been here and they have been parading around for a very, very long time. And I want us to be very cognizant of it and honest about it without shame. That's the aim here. And this is I already know what time it is. It's going to rattle a lot of folk, because in hearing these words and hearing these types of perspectives, many people are going to see how they've committed these types of things, right? How they've tried to bypass or downplay, this assuming of Blackness, or, that's too Black. Let's not get to even play with it in our own lingo. That's too Black. They ain't going to like it now. Yeah. Right? We even have this in our language, this kind of debasing in a playful way ourselves. But is it really playful, or is it a reaction to reality, to a very strong reality that we have to deal with? And this is our way of coping with it, by making fun with the type of language and the type of terms we use to describe the phenomena of bypassing, of lullifying the assuming of Blackness within the sport or within whatever it is that we're doing, right? So yes, there's going to be the pushback and the feedback of people who will have to acknowledge how they bypassed it or how they try to nullify or discredit blackness as a seat of power in its own right in the sport. And I like that confrontation. I want people to confront that because I'm confronting it. That's the reason why I'm posing these questions, and the reason why I'm putting this on the table is because it is important for us to be able to discuss as boxing fans and as Black people wherever we are in the diaspora. But yeah, it's definitely a reality, and unfortunately, a lot of this perspective of the bypassing and of the lessening of our visibility in the sport is held by many Black people. Okay, with it, held by ourselves. When I say Black people, I'm talking to us. A lot of us hold that perspective about our own culture, and to me, that's very problematic, and it's something that I seek to rectify and air out so that it can be removed from our psyche and our thinking and our posturing. Now, returning to the point of why I mentioned the presence of cultural representation among various European and, let's say, Mexican fighters, for example, we're using that as an example, right? I did that because I want you and I want us to think about them. I want you to ask yourself, why is it that you have an acceptance level of these groups being overtly expressed on a cultural level within boxing, right? Proudly and beautifully backed within boxing and proudly and beautifully represented within boxing on a cultural level. Why is it that you have an acceptance level of that? And I also want you to ask yourself, why is it that you don't see a central, comprehensive cultural representation among our people within boxing? Now, honestly, I'd posit that it is well overdue for us to create a code for ourselves in which we can express our own symbolism, express our own flag or whatever have you, our own banner, our own music, our own slogans that strictly and purposefully represent a unified Black culture, whatever that is that we define for ourselves, right? Something that could be appended, right, to all people of the diaspora, right? For example, let's use a flag as a point of symbolism, right? For the sake of example, let's say we choose a red, black, and green flag, right, on our Pan-African shit. And this flag represents our unity as a collective, as a force, as a culture, and definitely as, in the boxing world, right? A Black collective in the boxing world that supports this mentality and this mindset and this cultural kin and the cultural pride specifically for us, right? So let's say when we show up to these boxing matches, when we're there, showing up for Earl Spence Jr. or Bud Crawford or your Devin Haney's or whoever, we show up enforcing the culture that made them and enforcing the culture that supports them, which is us, right? The people they come from. Let's say if somebody is from Haiti or Jamaica or Nigeria or UK, right? Because we got brothers and sisters who walk all over this planet, right? They can rep, let's say, their land and their flag as per usual, as expected, right? But in addition to that, they could also append the red, black, and green on some gangster shit to show the unity of our culture at large as a boxing collective, right? As a Black boxing collective, and rep that shit. That will be heavy, y'all. Real talk. That shit just got me hella hyped thinking about that, or maybe we could use some, let's say if it's not a flag, or if it is, let's say we keep the flag, we could also add some Black Air Forces to that shit, right? So we show up to these fights with our red, black, and green, whatever, whether it's a flag or a shirt or a hat or whatever the fuck, a little symbol on your t-shirt and some Black Air Forces. That's like, yo, we here, we representing our fighters, whoever it is that we like. And, we just show up with that cloth, with that symbolism. That shit is hella powerful to me, y'all. You feel? Like, what goes over many people's heads is that representation is everything. It's everything. Okay? We seem to understand that very lucidly and very intelligibly when it comes to everybody else but ourselves. But ourselves, right? We've become afraid, in my assessment, to affirm ourselves to the world in this way. Okay? This is the type of thinking that we need to combat. This is the type of thinking that I am trying to galvanize within you. Okay? Within us as a collective, as a beautiful Black boxing collective, because it very much ties into our lack of confidence and courage as a group and as individuals. Okay? We can go around, let's say, it made me just think of, we can go around wearing a jersey of a team or a brand or whatever the case, or wear a brand of shoe for a team or for an industry or whatever have you. But at the same time, we'll be timid about identifying ourselves as a collective that pours big dollars into these industries and into these teams and the like, right? We pour big dollars into those industries as supporters, and we also pour and provide all of their talent, all of the athletes that these big corporations make major bank off of. Millions of dollars for them on the field or in the ring or wherever. Or we could show up with their jersey and represent that. Why can't we have something that represents us for us while we enjoy and partake in whatever mass level sporting event is at hand, right? It's just something to think about. I thought that was an interesting matter. But another interesting point to also be had here that I wanted to point out is, Black boxers and Black boxing fans both have an issue regarding misrepresentation. I say all of this as a matter of representation for us, right? But in my view, Black boxers and Black fans are both dealing with an issue of misrepresentation. Of course, historically, in order to obscure, as I said earlier, a semblance of, let's say, authority from Black fighters, in order to kind of diminish the presence of that authority, that supremacy, that masculinity from Black fighters, what happened was that we were caricatured, meaning that an image was made of us, a portrayal of us was made that was laced in all types of stereotype and willful delusion. Okay. Now, they just seem to have, had it out for us, y'all. It hasn't let up yet where, the downplaying, the wanting to downplay all of the strength that was being showcased, all of the accomplishments that were piling up, it just had to be downplayed historically with us. Okay. They had to explain away, this Black vigor, right? They had to explain away these obvious, athletic abilities, this genius, this excellence, right? And say things like, he's strong, but he's not the brightest tool in the shed, right? Looking ass. He's strong. Don't ask him to read the book now, you hear? He not gonna understand nothing on that page. Pretty much is the mindset, right? This mindlessness, has to be explained away. You're this strong, but your faculties aren't all together. So you're strong, but you're only strong because you're lacking intelligence. It's absurd, what has been postured historically regarding our people. But yes, that is what I mean by the caricaturing of our people. The downplaying of the strength. And those very themes have carried over and crossed over into our times today, where we've seen Black male fighters, touted as the brute, right? The buck, right? So to speak, everything else, but not the businessman, right? Not beautiful and strong and athletic and also a family man, right? Not the professional, right? And when somebody does exemplify that, i.e., let's say Devin Haney, for example, then he is ridiculed. made fun of as a private school kid, not from the hood, right? Because he doesn't embody those particular stereotypes, right? Oh, he's not powerful, right? Oh, doesn't pack a punch. All of these types of things, all of this rhetoric is of a past history and past connection of a mindset that is absurd and that is totally against the betterment of our progress as people, even as toted by our own people. Okay? Anybody enacting this mindlessness and this sense of lack of thought are talking like this, and a lot of the times, unfortunately, don't even know it. Don't even know that they're doing it. Many of them do, but yes, there are, in fact, others who don't even know when it's happening when they say these types of things. You know what I mean? We could bring this right front and center to today and everything that's happening today. This is how Devin Haney can be so carelessly handled, as in the recent charades and scandals that's going on with Ryan Garcia, a blatant drug cheat. This is how he can commit multiple and illegal violations against the sport, threaten Devin's life in that ring, and have a feeble boxing public still cling to the delusion of his innocence. It's absolutely absurd. And it's part and parcel of a history that is steeped in the degradation of the image of Black masculinity within the sport. Okay? Very serious here, y'all. Now, the same misrepresentation that I was speaking about as it pertains to the boxer, the same applies for the Black boxing fan. Okay? We have been, y'all, the things that I've heard over the years, we have been belittled, okay, and lessened in our potential as boxing fans. We have been lessened regarding our influence on the sport. And we have been overlooked substantially regarding our paying dollars, y'all. How many times have you heard it? How many times have you heard it? Boxing media really wants you to believe that you, the Black boxing goer, have no standing, have no visibility, have no say, no objective in the sport of boxing. How many times have you guys heard, oh, well, Black fans don't spend money on fights? Or, Black boxing fans are just, they're just being emotional again. Or, they just want the Black fighter to win. all types of crazy sayings, that cannot possibly be one size fits all. It's absolutely absurd, you guys. Now, why are you worried about what my beautiful Black self is doing and how I'm responding to a sport that I choose to participate in as a fan? Why are you worried? Huh? Am I asking you what you're doing and why you're showing up or not showing up for this or that within your personal engagement with your sport of choice? It's absolutely ludicrous to me and disrespectful. Disrespectful. This is the rhetoric, you guys. This is what's at hand. It's the rhetoric that shows a disavowal of our influence as boxing fans. Why would it be any different, with the Black boxing fans' influence from any other group? Don't people show up to watch boxing? People show up to watch boxing. How is it that you can surmise, anything as it pertains specifically to one versus another? Are you taking statistics? Whose questions are you presenting? What questions and to whom? How many have been quantified? How did you quantify such a thing? It's crazy to me. Boxing is rife with Black excellence, Black talent, Black sweat, and Black blood. Okay? For media outlets who push this narrative to even assume, that they can delineate between the Black boxing dollar and say, a Mexican one, for example, is an absolute fallacy. And to diminish in any way our support or our influence as sports goers and boxing goers is preposterous to me. It's just absurd, and it really makes one wonder, well, why was this particular narrative about the black boxing fan so pervasive? Because we don't hear about the Polish boxing fans and what they're spending on and how they're streaming. And we definitely don't hear about whatever percentage of Mexican fighters may be doing that, or people in Scotland or in Ireland. What the fuck? What is going on here? So that the levels of misrepresentation for Black people, sportsmen and fans alike, particularly boxing fans and boxing sportsmen, it's astounding. It's astounding, the levels. And this is just, an example. There are myriad things that we can get into, myriad factors and all sorts of, things that we can tap into regarding this. But this is why I said at the beginning that there may need to be several videos on this topic, or at least surrounding topics of this point, because it is multifaceted and multi-layered and extensive, to say the least. I'll ask this question again. How is it that the most dominant people within the sport, historically and currently, have no representation, no unifying factor that ties us to an identity, to a source of power, history, and understanding? This is the Black code that needs solidifying in the fire of our people. Why not, join our love for the sport with the same unabashed cultural identity as anybody else, right? My love for boxing is fierce. And I know I'm not the only Black person with that heat and that heart and that type of passion, right? I want to identify with people of my likeness. And I also want to identify with people of my mentality, wherever they may walk on the planet, right? I do not have to relinquish one drop of my cultural ties or of my Blackness in order to participate in sports or in anything else. I show up fully, and I want to encourage all Black fight fans who agree to begin thinking about a way to assume our identity and a representation that cannot and will not be bypassed or diminished in boxing or anywhere else. Okay? Yes, we can show up to support our own. Yes, we can root for whomever we like, however we like. That is not relegated to any other particular group outside of us. No, that's not how this works. We show up for our own too. We put that fire down too. And we stand on business too. Okay? Black American style, diaspora African style, Caribbean style too. You feel me? That's the type of time that I'm on. And you know what, y'all? Who knows? If we can unify on some boxing shit, the sky is the limit on what we can claim next from a unified and collective perspective. You feel me? That's some powerful talk right there. Anyway, that's enough rambling for me. I'm on to the next, y'all. Peace.